Welcome everybody to the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center Something to Talk About program. These programs are held on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays on Zoom and are being recorded for those who would like to view it on our YouTube page at a later date. The Something to Talk About programs are sponsored by Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers memory care, independent living, assisted living, in addition to day stay and respite programs on the beautiful campuses located in Rolling Bay. For a tour, to learn more information, please call 360-594-1010. We would also like to acknowledge that we are gathering on the ancestral homeland of the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water, who have lived on the water of the Salish Seas since time immemorial. We honor them and are grateful for their hospitality. Now, today we're going to be speaking with Anne Lovejoy about the book Braiding, Sweetgrass, and I'll let her fill in all the wonderful details on where we're going to go from here. So I'll hand the mic over to Anne, and there you go.
Thanks, Lena. You know, it's funny. A couple years ago, I think I did one of these STTA programs, Something to Talk About programs on braiding sweetgrass. And there were quite a few people, maybe 15, or do you remember, Rita? There was quite a lot. But when I said, as anybody who's read the book, nobody had read the book at that time. And I was kind of flabbergasted because I thought we were going to have the kind of rich, interactive conversation that I was hoping for. But in fact, we didn't. We had me telling stories because, but I could see there was a lot of interest in this book. And, you know, it's an amazing book. Like, it is such a rich, incredible resource. It's so full of ideas and information and themes. You could literally have a session on every page, almost even every sentence. It could take 10 years to get through this book. And that's not what I'm looking to do here, but I don't want to do our book group series like a one and done. I want to really take some time with these themes and these amazing concepts and make sure we really mull them over together. And one of the reasons that we're having this pre-program kind of is to kind of figure out what is the best way we can make this series interactive and have it really resonate in our lives. Have it something more than just check the box, I read the book, but bring it to life. And just right off the top, I just want to say we've already booked 5 sessions because there are 5 sections kind of. So there's the planting sweetgrass, tending sweetgrass, picking sweetgrass, braiding sweetgrass, burning sweetgrass. And then there's the epilogue, which if, you know, that piece is like, what do we do with this now, right? So that it'll be 2 Mondays in September, 2 Mondays in October, 2 Mondays in November. And what I'm hoping for is that if we can figure out a way to keep it lively and keep it up, kind of, I guess I could say, then I feel like we'll have really good conversations. And the publisher actually said, this is sort of cool, their intention is they think that reading should be life-changing. It's kind of funny. It's a Milkweed is a very small little nonprofit publisher, and they really specialize in publishing books from sort of little known voices, people who maybe wouldn't be heard otherwise at all. And when they published Braiding Sweetgrass back in 2013, it really took off for them, and it was more than any other book they've ever had before or since. And what they really found was that people love this book so much because of its humanity, as well as its, you know, there's teaching, there's lore, there's science, there's artfulness, there's spirituality, but it's really, really rich in humanity. But one thing that I see in these books that I think can be a little challenging for some people is that the native traditions that Dr. Kimmerer is embracing and teaching feel that everything has personhood. Maybe humanity is the wrong word for that, but personhood, because many, many, many native traditions talk about the rock people and the bird people and the plant people. And I've had people say to me how weird that was or how strange that seemed. So I'd like to kind of have a little conversation with you all about what do you think some of those main themes should look like? How should we go about this? I see Barbara. Martha, you want to unmute? And
there we go. Yeah, I'm excited that you're doing this book. I go to Bethany Lutheran Church, although when I was in Oregon, I was in a whole drumming circle for 12 years. And so I suggested this and only 2 people were interested in it. But I am so glad that the island is doing it. And we do once a month gathering. But another thing that I did this summer was we have our last session Thursday is speed read the New Testament. And I'll tell you, I just feel like, yikes, I don't want this anymore. I can't believe it. The blood of Jesus I'm just going, no, come on, we're past that. And so this is really exciting. But also in this Lutheran magazine is an article called Generosity as Resistance. And it's about potlashes in the Northwest. And I'm just going, how did this get in a Lutheran magazine? But she talks about our society is an economy of fear and scarcity. Mm-hmm. And if we had an economy of generosity, how different it would be. So what I'm really looking for in dialogue with this book is about let's do this different kind of a society. Jesus talked about it. Why don't we just do it instead of this old, ancient, patriarchal, tribal thing? Why don't we do this new thing? That's enough.
No, yeah, exactly. And, interestingly, we can do it. And I mean, I think that's what Dr. Kimmerer is asking us to do. Rita, was that your good hand?
That was my good hand. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm excited to read this because I think a lot of times we go along and we don't, if we're not exposed to other things, we don't know other things, but how we can change our lives and still stay within, our basic beliefs that we hold dear to ourselves and, that we have, but how we can maybe have a different look at that how we looked at it and we can look at it through a set of fresh eyes so we can integrate both things.
Yeah.
Barbara, did you want to step in?
Well, one thing that, and I read part of it, it's been a long time ago, so I retained very little. But what you were talking about in terms of plant people and rock people and everything, just part of, and that she believes in, that in English, we only capitalize words that refer to people, and that they capitalize and have respect for people and plants and rocks and water and everything. And so I think just looking at how the language shapes their worldview in such a respectful way for everything else that's around us.
Yeah, and she talks, one of the big themes in this book is respect. Mm-hmm. and a respectful relationship, which, I think relationship is, okay, this may sound a little off at first, but bear with me. Many years ago when my young kids were young teenagers, I got a call from AOL saying that we were going to have our cut off because somebody was downloading graphic material. And I said, oh, you mean like comics? And she's like, I mean pornography. Well, it turned out that they were downloading Playgirl or something like that, Playboy. Mm-hmm. But the point is, I got them this book because I thought, okay, they need to know they don't have a dad at home. We got to figure out how to have this respectful relationship with each other and with sexuality and with women. Well, I got a copy of this book called The New Male Sexuality. And I looked in beginning, and it said, why is it called the new male sexuality when men haven't really changed that much? It's because all the original editions of this book did not include the word relationship. I
Oh
know,
my.
and that has really, like, I've thought about that in terms of relationship and relating so many times in my life, and I thought it's a real sort of telling detail about our culture, that our popular culture, the white culture, if you want to, isn't really respectful of relationships. And if they're not respectful of relationships to other humans, how can we be respectful of relationships with the living earth, or with the plant people and the rock people and the water people, or whatever it is? And yeah, I mean, that was just such an interesting glimpse into how we are changing as a culture, that having relationships is a responsibility, right? But it's one that maybe in our younger years isn't really called out that much.
I think we can look at the what's happening in Maui right now, and many people are saying the aloha spirit, the aloha spirit. We are together. We some people are saying, being critical about this, that, and this, but others are saying we have the aloha spirit and we will rebuild. And you can see them, working together on things, and they don't need the government. I mean, the government's not stepping in fast enough. They're just doing it with private boats and people on the shore, passing things on. I thought that was really neat. And they also said if they had put those horns on, people would have gone up in the mountains. That's what you do for tsunamis. And they would have been burned up there. So, I mean, yeah, so.
The sirens, you mean, the warning
Right.
sirens, yeah.
They would have done the wrong thing. They're not what you do for fires. Yeah.
But you bring up an interesting point, that Hawaii still has more of an intact culture, at least in some areas. And
Yeah.
of course, Lahaina was the old royal city, or whatever, center of the heart of the country.
Kingdom.
Yeah. And so that aloha spirit is kind of an extension of that culture. And one of the things I've read quite a bit about is like the lack, like we have pop culture and we have kind of, church cultures in some ways, but as a country, our culture seems to have turned into belligerence more than anything else. And we don't have that aloha spirit of helping each other out. And there were certainly times when we have had that, but it is less and less part of the pop culture these days, popular culture. And I'm curious about, like, can we use this book to steer our thinking and our behavior? Because as you said, Martha, we got to do something. We can't just read about it and talk about it. How do we change?
I hate to keep saying one more thing,
Sure.
but this morning, the ukulele guy is astonishing. His role, he said, what I am trying to do is get children off of screens. He said, if they do a ukulele, which has this wonderful background to it of community, that he said the parents are bribing their kids to take ukulele lessons. They can do more on their screens if they will take a ukulele lesson. And he said, I just want them to connect with each other. And our assignment, here we are, these 5 old people, he said, now you know how to play Happy Birthday. I want you to go home and I want you to teach it to somebody so that you're doing one-on-one with them. And so that and then they can do it. And then maybe if it's a kid or something, you can give them a ukulele for their birthday later on, and they will know how to play something. I've never seen such a relational guy. I just thought he ought to be giving a talk to this, on here.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yes.
I found him at the library. He was giving lessons to this group of teenagers. And I have to say that several of them had their hoodies on and they were kind of down, but they were plinking away. And it was really quite remarkable that they kept coming back, because there is something relational about playing music together, about connecting. And of course, ukulele is a Hawaiian instrument, right? That goes back to that sort of cultural doing things together, right? And keeping it simple.
He said that he's working with teenagers who are game addicted.
Mhm.
It's like something in the DSM already. Yeah. Yeah. Like it's a almost disease now.
Well, I think that probably is true. When we think about what happened to our culture in COVID, what happened to our country and all around the world, a lot of different countries, we were taught to be afraid of each other.
Mhm.
Nobody really knew what was going on. So there was so many unknowns that we became very fear-based, which we already kind of were anyway, right? And that social isolation, 6 feet, I remember people had poles they would carry around, a 6-foot pole saying, you stay at the other end of that pole if you want to talk. Remember that? That wasn't that very long ago, but it was like how much that contributed to the lack of connection today. I think we have no idea yet how much harm that has done for us. But we keep coming back to the idea like, so what are we going to do about it? And I like the idea, Martha, what you were saying about making sure that we do, and that's part of what I hope for from this series. And it's like, how can we structure it so that we all leave with some ideas about how to do?
Mhm.
Lena, jump
I
in.
think that, you were talking about how do we want to kind of form a framework on how to approach this book. And I think what you just said would be a really great opening because to the group in that we would bring that piece about relationships. Because I think when you have your viewers jumping in on this topic, that really is a good first step into jumping into this book is the relationships of us all. And your example of COVID and what came of it. And now we've got people adding fuel to the fire of that with culture wars and the fear of each other and things like that. That would be a good place to start. Now, I don't know if that'll dominate much of the STTAs moving forward within this book group as we move along. But I think the relationship piece would be a really great start. I like that.
Well, and like we said earlier, Dr. Kimmerer uses relational ideas and it talks about relationship in almost one of these essays in some way or another. And it's a running thread through many, many Native cultures that part of being in relationship with the earth and with everything on the earth, like all creation, if you will, is that respectful connection. And that's something, obviously our power and money culture doesn't have that relationship, but building it for ourselves and then passing it on to kids, like Martha saying, take your ukulele, now you know how to play something, go teach somebody else to do it. Part of that could be something that we build into this series, like ask everybody to bring some ideas about like, what could we teach? What do we get from this and who could we teach it to? I do remember when I was doing that first one-off program about braiding sweetgrass and telling the stories from it that I could remember off the top of my head, my grandkids happened to be here that day and they were playing, but as I kept telling these stories, they got closer and closer and closer. And then they were sitting at the table with me. And then afterward, they had a lot of questions because I was talking about the way that people collect material to make baskets and the extremely respectful way in which they ask permission of the tree, ask permission of the soil, ask permission of the sweetgrass or whatever the braiding material, whatever those materials are. And the way that nothing is wasted. It's all regarded not as a resource, but as you've taken something and now it's your responsibility to use it wisely and carefully and make sure it doesn't turn into trash, right? I was really struck by that, and so were they. And I thought, yeah, there's something here, but I can't quite figure out how we can tap that.
I would suggest that you assign, like we're going to read page 1 through 50 or whatever, and we'll be talking about it on this particular date so that you don't have people coming without reading the book. And then I don't know, I read it last year. Then you could also, give assignments, like this guy did. But, it could be, okay, how about this week before we meet again? look around and look at relationships, look, could you build a new relationship? I did want to bring in this, just a minute, this thing that just happened in Montana. Montana judge hands young plaintiffs significant victory in landmark climate trial. I don't know if you guys have been following that. More than a dozen young plaintiffs, the nation's United States first constitutional climate trial. And they, this is what they came up with, ruled that Montana's continued development of fossil fuels violates a clause in the state's constitution that guarantees its citizens the right to a clean and healthy environment.
Oh, that's
Okay.
fantastic.
So that's, to me, part of this,
It is
Part-
exactly, Martha.
Yeah. So
Well-
that could be an assignment too. Like I get Good News, what is it called? Good News Network every day. And they have do you get that too? Yeah. They have good stories about things that are happening in the world every day. You get three or four good stories. That whole idea of focusing on good. We've done enough of focusing on fear and scarcity.
I also like the Americans of Conscience. I don't know if any of you follow that, but it's pretty much every week or so, though they took the month of August off. They'll put out, it was started by a woman in Oregon who just really wanted to do something. And she always is careful. There's a whole team now, and they balance, like, these are the action pieces you can take. And there's usually 3 or 4 with links and everything else. If you want to let your voice be heard about these things.
Is it Drawdown?
No, it's called Americans of Conscience.
Okay, there's another kind of thing called.
Yeah, it's similar to that.
Yeah.
But they always have good news. And sometimes it's good news first because you're going to need it. And sometimes it's layered in. But I like that balance too, because that also is kind of relational, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we're going to look at some really hard things, which we're going to have to, if we look at them, and I'm always struck when I read this, for me, Braiding Sweetgrass is kind of comfort reading, so I've said that to people who looked at me like I was crazy, but I love the tenderness in it that she carries for the whole world, like all that is on the planet. That respectful tenderness and the generosity is so beautiful to me. And it's something I have never felt in structured religion, if you will. And I really miss that. And I think that's a piece, like, if we come away with that, like how to walk a more spiritual walk without being, pious or whatever. Because so much spiritual tradition in the culture that I was raised in was really judgmental and not really very kind.
If you really look at what Jesus said, he said, judge not. He said, turn the other cheek. He said, give a second chance. He said, if we actually did what Jesus suggested instead of the church that built on it and St. Paul, we'd be in a better spot.
Yeah, so let's do it. I think that's part of that piece. And I like the idea of having a kind of assignment, but I also want to feel like if somebody just doesn't have the chops to read this, but really wants to hear about it, I really want it to be open and available. Right. We did that with Stamped. We said, you don't have to have read the book, or you don't have to read all of it or whatever it was. And I think there were people there who maybe hadn't, well, I know there were, but who said they got quite a bit out of listening just to the conversation and the ideas that were being explored. I don't think that the idea, I mean, I do like the idea of coming away with some let's do it things, but I don't think that we should be looking for answers as such, like right way, wrong way. It's, to me, it's not about judgment that way, but more about really being thoughtful in how we take our next steps, right?
Subtle.
Rita.
Right, and I think, like, for me, it's a way to look at, how we do things now, how we might want to do things. And this is just a way to kind of think about that. I think that that's really, and I think the thing that stops us that stops all of us, I think, the most is fear.
Mhm.
And if we can, when we, and being in relationship with people helps with that fear. That is the thing. My brother always said, if we would spend as much time working on dealing with our problem as we do with our fear of not wanting to deal with it, we would be so much better off.
Mhm.
Which is, and I think fear is the one thing that keeps us from what fear, and whatever that means to each person and whatever the situation is. I think that is because we are so much more alike than we are different. We are, and especially women are so much more alike than we are different. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. So I'm really looking forward to this. And to be able to reflect for myself, how things are in my everyday life. I can't change what happened in the past. I mean, I can reflect on it but this, I think, helped us sometimes reflect on what our relationship was with a person or a job or, whatever it is. And then we can go, oh, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Or maybe I can do something a little different to make this a little better for everybody, myself included. That's just my take on it.
It's making me think a little about one of our conversations in one of these programs so long ago, and I don't remember which one even now, but it was about how to be in relationship with your community. And we were talking about how just simple civility, like being courteous and friendly to checkout person, say, makes so much difference to them and to ourselves. It's like when we acknowledge somebody else's personhood, right? I think that's that namaste thing of like, I see the divine in you and you see the divine in me right now, give me my change. But it's sort of a, bringing that a little bit of spirit into just the ordinary stuff, right? Amy, what do you think about that? I'd love to hear your ideas.
Sound.
You're muted, honey.
There. Sorry. I was saying I feel like unprepared for this. I haven't yet read the book. Is the main idea here about how to approach review of the book and to spread ideas in the book amongst our senior groups?
Barbara?
I have a suggestion that might help Amy and anyone else who's interested in it. There's a wonderful interview with Robin Wall Kimmerer on a podcast called On Being by Krista Tippett. It's Krista Tippet. I think that's right, but it's just On Being. And it's a wonderful interview and will really kind of give you a context before you settle into the book.
That's a really good idea. Thank you. There's a number of great interviews with her, but that one is really good. You're right. And maybe what we can do is when we kind of announce the series, we can put that link in it that we did. Remember when we started the Stamped Book Club, we had that really interesting Trevor Noah interview with the two authors that I thought was really insightful and helped you see them as people, not just as historians, but you heard from them. Well, what were you trying to do with this anyway, right? And I think, yeah, that's a really good idea. And that, Amy, one of the things we're trying to do is have this be a no bar experience. Like you don't have to have read the book, but the things we're going to be talking about, there are 5 sections to the book plus an epilogue. And all of them really deal strongly in terms of relationships of people and place and plants and, everything else. And so I'm thinking from just what I'm getting today is kind of being in relationship could be the really overriding theme for all the sections. And then how and what we can kind of, because again, this book is so rich and so amazingly dense with thoughtful ideas. Any piece of it, you could talk for weeks about it, right? Um, and I want people to be able to do that, whether they've actually read the book or not.
Mhm, mhm.
I think another thing, she tends to be East Coast, is if there could be people that would know about connection to West Coast.
He does have a chapter about being in the West Coast.
Right,
It's-
she goes for one thing, yeah. I
Yeah.
think.
Barbara.
So I had another idea, and I don't know how to tie it in or if it's appropriate to, but just yesterday I read and saved a BBC article about
Yes,
Indigenous people
I got that one.
being environmental monitors all throughout Canada. And so it's a modern day and current example of, sort of the mindset that's in the book. So I thought that would be interesting, and maybe Barbara, and I can't remember her last name, from the Suquamish tribe.
Lawrence.
If she would have,
Lawrence.
if she would have anything to say about their tribal practices now, that might tie in the local part specifics.
Well, and actually she has done a program for us like that. And that's another link that we could put. That's a really good idea, because she did several programs for us about tribal traditions, and she did one on tribal practices today. That is exactly that. And
Great.
And yeah, I think one of the things you'll notice when we listen to those again or watch or whatever is that there's a lot of commonality in her discussion about Native culture here in the West Coast, and what Dr. Kimmerer is talking about more East Coast or Midwest. Minnesota, she's living in Maine, but a lot of her tradition stuff comes from her people in Minnesota as well. So yeah, I think looking at those commonalities is really important, but I think somehow I want to also stretch it past this is tribal spirituality to say this is human spirituality. And as we've already talked about a little bit, some major religions are lacking largely in this in this aspect, right?
I would say indigenous for the world.
Yeah,
South America, Africa,
totally.
Australia, yeah. But there's a whole different way of looking at life without we don't have to be conquerors, and that women could actually be leading things.
Yeah, and you see that a lot more. I get daily snippets from Nature magazine, which is UK based, and I'm really struck by how most of the articles they're highlighting and most of the people they're talking with are people of color, many women, more than half are women from all over the world, and that they're very willing to look at all kinds of like relational issues and racism issues and gender issues much more than any of the United States-based things I'm looking at. So that can be refreshing too, to kind of stretch out what resources are we calling on to inform ourselves. If we widen that net, what happens, like to your assumptions, right?
It's like the green belt that they're doing in the middle part of Africa right now to stop the Sahara Desert from coming down. It's amazing what the women especially are doing, planting trees, I mean, we talk about planting trees in a lot of areas. Yeah.
Well, I think women have been the workers force in many cultures, and still are. And look at us here, right? But again, to be inclusive is like to think about, so how do we reach out? How do we reach out to our grandkids or our neighbors, other kids we might know, pass our ukulele lessons on? How do we do that
I think we also have to make sure we honor our culture here. We can't just say we're bad, they're good.
Oh yeah, no, totally.
We have to kind of be uplifting in that way too. I'll have to think about that one.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really big on the no shame, no blame theory. It's like when we have these kind of conversations, there's a difference between looking honestly at the difficulties and throwing aspersions, making people feel terrible. I don't think there's any value in that. I don't think any of
Like
us,
Rita said, it's keeping our values, but looking at them differently. I think you said that at the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
well, and maybe rethinking our values, because I don't know about you all, but growing up in the 50s, I came away with some values, and every now and then I stub my toe on one of them and go, oh my God, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Well,
Rita.
I'll tell you. Okay, you see this hand? I'll tell you about the stubbing the toe. I broke these fingers in Ashland, Oregon.
Really?
And my daughter and I were in a coffee shop, and we were getting our espresso and our croissant, and there was a lady standing there, and on my daughter's sweater was a wasp. And she said,
Whoa.
oh, there's a wasp there. So, and I know Paige has been bitten and she's afraid. So, but it was early enough in the morning and it was kind of calm. So I said, just stand still, honey, and I'll get that off of you. So I swiped it off of her, got it on the floor, and I stepped on it. Now, I know you're not supposed to kill bees. And this lady just went berserk, pretty much. Oh, you killed the bee. Oh my God. And Paige goes, I'm allergic. But
Wow.
this lady was, so I thought to myself, now Rita, and I said, the whole world isn't going to end if I kill one bee. But if everybody kills one bee, it could be bad. I mean, that's what I said to her.
Good.
Then I went down and waited for my coffee, and the guy next to me says, oh, so you're a bee killer.
Oh, gee.
I said, yes, I am. And I'm going to end the whole world. And so then 5 minutes later, I'm out and I fall down. So I break my fingers. And so after we got out of the emergency room, Paige and I said to Paige, I said, you know why this happened, don't you? I said, it's because I killed a bee.
Oh.
And she goes, yeah, that woman put a hex on you.
Yes.
Barbara,
But what,
It's not really, but
an interesting example of how quick they were to judge you, not having any idea of how much work you do in our pollinator garden.
right?
Oh.
that's
Right.
but, I thought about it, and I've thought about it. I thought, and I mean, me, I'm pretty direct and just pretty, and so I thought to myself, well, Rita, it was still kind of kicking around a little bit on the floor. So I didn't know she was going to take it outside, but I was concerned.
Mhm.
So anyway, I could have probably handled it a little differently. So we'll just talk about.
I want to say one thing about Ashland, Oregon. In 2020, they had 2,200 houses and 100 businesses burned down in half an hour. 2 days. So that's another one like the Paradise Fire.
Exactly.
Dead, and God knows how many houses.
Right.
Like Maui. Yeah. So
Right. But I thought I could have probably maybe handled that a little better, ladies. So,
no,
this,
I think you were protecting your daughter. You were protecting her.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with a mother protecting her daughter. You were Mother Bear there,
you have no idea. But anyway, that was just, it's just one of those things, because whether right or wrong, I could have probably, maybe been a little more gracious about the whole thing.
You could have
Well,
asked
it also
somebody else.
sort
to
of
move.
shows how complex a lot of things are. Nothing, we're
Exactly.
me and Lena are always saying, let's keep it simple, let's keep it simple. But there are things that are hard to keep simple because they're not really simple.
Mhm.
Everything's
Exactly.
connected to everything else. Didn't John Muir say something like that? Pick up anything in the universe and you'll find it's connected to everything else.
Oh yeah, the web of
Right.
love or whatever.
Yeah, and he was kind of a wacky.
So I think reading some of this sometimes, but anyway, that's why I have this, because I got it. So anyway, it's just one of those things. But I think our relationship, again, that's this whole relationship thing is so important, and how we can, do things or stop a little bit before we do things,
Yeah.
or
Good.
just kind of think of it in a different way.
The thing is that it's easy in our daily life to get caught up in stuff and not really act the way we might necessarily want to. And I do think that's part of what this whole sort of slower pace that
Yes.
Dr. Kimmer talks about a lot is like, rather than being reactive, that we breathe a little and start to respond. And that's something I think probably a lot of us have been working on for a long time. Our culture is very reactive.
Mhm,
You know,
it
I've
is.
had many times when somebody says something to me and I have to think about it, they say, "Did you hear what I said?" Or "You're ignoring me." And I'm like, actually, I was thinking about what you said, but I don't think that fast always, right? But we're, you know, kind of tuned into this quick, quick, quick. And slowing down, stepping back, I think that's a piece I'd like to try to call out too. Like, how would this play out in slow-mo if we were gonna, you know, be a little more relational about it? And I like
Right.
thinking in terms of relational rather than thoughtful, because thoughtful, thoughtless is pretty judgy right there, right?
Right.
You think about,
Yeah.
oh, if I'm in relation to all these things, how do I want to respond to this?
Rita, I think that situation too, and I mean, it's just a good example. Two things can be correct at the same time, coming from two different angles.
Right.
Your angle protecting your daughter, on point. Of course, you would protect your daughter. The other lady's angle, protecting the bee, is important in a whole different, conversation. So there's two things right at the same time, and how the two humans interacted on that situation. Again, is that going to be where this book is going to hopefully teach us and pull us into, and then kind of get us down that path of how are we going to apply all of this, what we're learning, with how we're treating our earth? Because if we need to treat our earth, is that what's going to bring us all together with our relationship piece as humans? Is how we're treating our earth, our climate change, the Maui fires we were just talking about at the beginning, climate change, the fires we just seen here in Kitsap County in the last couple days, Pierce County. Is this all going to come back in full circle? But I love it. The relationship piece, your story was a great little, bringing it down to local piece about how we can kind of break this down a little bit.
I still feel like ill prepared for this.
Cool.
Do you have like a number of sessions already established, or a certain number? And will it be like hour long, or are you discussing like how to be free flowing or to have topics, and what are the goals?
Yeah, exactly. So we have picked out, we have 6 sessions lined up, 2 in September, 2 in October, 2 in November, because there are 5 sections of the book and an epilogue. So we were going to kind of do it that way. And all of the themes are slightly different, but they're all interrelated very much. And that's why she talks about the braid as a running theme. Like, these stories are braided together, woven together. The taking different pieces and making one thing out of them. And she does it in terms of, planting sweetgrass, growing it, harvesting it,
Wow.
braiding it, burning it, right? So there's all those pieces, but I think we're going to do each section and ask people to read at least one of, because there's 32 essays, right? And so about 5 or 6 in each of these sections. So if people could read even just one of those essays, and there's 2 weeks between the meetings, so that gives pretty much time. Or I think we will probably include, as Barbara pointed out, there's some really good videos for people who that's easier. We'll include links to that and suggest maybe watch one of these, or you can also get from the Libby at the library. They have Barbara, they have a, the author is reading her own book, and she has such a beautiful, soft, gentle voice. I love listening to her while I'm knitting. It's just like, oh, this is so. And we will have books. We're going to have some books when Reed's on vacation, but when he gets back, we were trying to get a sense of how many people would like a book. And I'm so far about 17 people have said they would like a book to me. So I'm assuming there's more. So we may not get 100 like we did with Stamped, but we will probably get a substantial number and make them available to people.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great.
But the
Mhm.
library does have copies, and and also Libby has several copies, like I said, if that's easier.
Will we be together for the sessions, or will be Zoom and together like hybrid session?
Well, that's what I was sort of asking at the beginning. Like, do we feel I like both. And I felt
Yeah.
like with Stamped, it was really valuable to have the in-person as well as the online.
Yeah.
It does require 2 hosts. So that would be a piece, like
Mhm.
somebody has to be the online kind of managing things online. And
Mhm.
someone has to be managing things in person. And as maybe this book, I don't think will be as contentious as Stamped was at times. But
Mhm.
I know that there are people who find it kind of offensive that the author and that a lot of Native traditions hold that there is personhood in all things, and that for some people is really doesn't fit with what they know. And so that might be a stumbling block, but it's certainly worth looking at and talking about, right?
Right, right. Yeah.
Well, that's called pantheism, when you have spirit in everything.
I think there's a bit of a difference because I don't think it's
Pantheism too?
theistic. It's not about godness, it's about personhood. Um,
Oh,
and
Oh, yeah.
there's like animism, there's other terms for,
Yeah.
and many cultures had that thing where like every little brook would have a shrine next to it, and every little
Right.
special place would have a spirit of that place. That's a little bit different.
And
to-
Ecuador, the country, recognizes that the river has a spirit. The river
Yeah.
is personhood.
Yeah,
The river can sue a town
well,
for polluting it.
exactly. And that's what, that is more in line, but it isn't that the river god is going to rise up and smite you. It's more the river itself is an entity that has the right to be clean.
Right.
Mhm.
That's it. So it's not a theism exactly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the only reason I said that was that Christianity has touched on that in some ways, but I think some types of Christianity don't recognize it.
Oh, definitely. That's correct.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. And so we're not here to step on anybody's toes or make anybody feel shamed or embarrassed. But I think we would really like to open up some closed windows and let some air in.
Mhm.
Our
Mhm.
own closed windows too. Like who here doesn't have some? I sure do. And I think that broader thinking, more generous thinking, thinking about connectedness I just feel like it takes us to such rich places. It's really worth the journey, even if it's not always comfortable.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
And one thing, so I guess I would ask all of you to weigh in, like, do you prefer a hybrid session? Would you rather not? I mean, Barbara.
I think
Hybrid.
hybrid is important for people with maybe mobility issues or whatever else. I think it's really important to
Transportation
keep it
trouble.
both. Yep.
Mhm.
And sometimes we maybe couldn't get to the senior center. I mean, I'd rather be there in person, but there might be some day that I can't get there. So then I can have the option of zooming in on it, which I think is
Mhm.
pretty cool.
Amy,
Mhm.
you were going to say something too there.
Oh, I think they got it covered, really. Just about, sometimes it's just transportation difficulty or different, maybe you're under the weather, so it's nice to have that option. I was thinking about if the sections begin with planting and caring for and so on, we could be talking about what do we in our culture plant
Mhm.
that we nurture and kind of nurse along, and how do we harvest it, and like what kind of recognition do we give those things? So some questions like that to bring it into our daily experience.
Well,
was-
and
yeah.
I think open-ended questions are really helpful to not that there's a right or wrong, but like, what do you think about that? Or how does that
Mhm.
work in your life? Rather than what did she say about on page 14? It's not going to be a
Mhm.
quiz, but
Mhm.
more really exploring. One thing I like about the idea of the hybrid, or at least to have it, the film, is that then it can be recorded. And, some of those stamped ones got viewed by well over 100, some of them were 250 people.
That's great.
Yeah, but I mean, that's
Uh-huh.
not going to happen with 10 of us sitting around a table. So it's more
That's
just
the other wonderful thing about like having it on Zoom, because you can record it and have it available. That's
yeah.
a great feature of it.
I would like to do that because I think it's a powerful tool for all of us. And as you've all said, you know, accessibility is part of the idea of programming, right? It's inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And that this format is very accessible.
Well,
But
and sometimes you don't always remember about what's said, or you want to go back and review it. So we can see it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yay!
Do you have the dates set yet for this?
Yeah, I do. So it's Mondays, all Mondays. So September 11th and 25th, October 16th and 30th, and November 13th and 27th.
Okay.
Well, it looks like we're coming to the end of our time here. And thank you so much for leading this group. This sounds like it's going to be a really great discussion on
It's like
several.
a great discussion we had today. I mean, I love this kind of
Wonderful
conversation,
discussion.
right?
And
Thank
so-
you all for your contributions, and thank you,
Yeah.
Lena, for hosting.